right, so I want to cover a few things that are before the board right now in terms of policy that are of critical importance to the state. The first thing is comment has opened on the public standards for English language arts and mathematics. We had over 200 teachers put in 6,000 volunteer hours in reviewing the prior public comment on these and then coming up with a revised draft. So the public comment site, it's very easy to remember. It's k12standards.az.gov. And I'm going to put my ask up first that please have your teachers comment on the standards. We've had a relatively slow start on getting public feedback on these. One of the things that's different about the website this year compared to before is that teachers and members of the community can comment at the standard level. It's a very easy site to negotiate. So people can either comment overall or they can comment on the individual grade level for the standards. So please give your teachers an opportunity to do this. Public comment closes on October 3rd, and there's an expectation from the board that we have a robust session of feedback on these standards before they consider adopting them. What will happen is once public comment closes on October 3rd, then those comments will be reviewed by the working groups that are housed at the department. They'll generate a new draft, and then that'll go back to the committee and the board. Another opportunity besides the web, did everybody get the website written down? AZ, what is it? k12standards.az.gov. Good. The other opportunity to comment is public hearings. We're starting public hearings today. There's 3 staff members that will be involved in visiting 13 counties across the state. Locally, we start tonight at Peoria at 6 p.m. So if you're around there, please drop by or have your community stop by and make comments. We'll be at Madison Elementary on Thursday night, and then the following week we'll be at Chandler. All of the public stops in terms of the public hearings are posted on the board's website. They're also posted on the standards website, which is k12standards.az.gov. The other thing, as Dr. Hansen mentioned, is we really need feedback on the administrator standards. We've had great feedback from Dr. Hansen. She's also presented to the board. We've also had great feedback from the college deans at the universities regarding the educator prep programs. But what we haven't heard back from is from you, from people in the field, in terms of wanting the updated administrator standards and your support for those. We're having a public hearing on that on September 19th at 1 p.m. If you can't attend that hearing, please have people send written feedback to the board, which you can send it to inbox@sbe.az.gov. It is critical that the board get feedback on this from the field. They recognize that there's very strong support for the change, the updated standards from the ed prep programs, but they're really looking for the principals and the superintendents to offer feedback on them. So whether you support them or you don't, give the board some feedback on this, because they're really looking to the field at this point to get some feedback. The next thing I want to talk about are some policy updates. The board has formed 3 ad hoc advisory groups to give them policy feedback in 3 critical areas. One deals with A to F school accountability, the other is on K-3 literacy, and the third one is educator enforcement actions. Where the board sits right now on A to F is that Vice President Tim Carter has made a proposal in terms of a conceptual framework, and the elements of that framework include measures on proficiency, measures on growth, measures on English language proficiency, and measures on high school graduation rates. These are required under ESSA. If you look at a K-8 versus 9-12, proficiency, growth, English language, those are all required for K-8. For 9-12, proficiency, English language proficiency, and high school grad rates are required. The other thing that Vice President Carter has introduced in terms of this conceptual framework are college and career readiness measures. And he's had some discussion about those in the context of K-8 and 9-12. What some research has shown in other states, what they've done in the context of K-8 is there's not a robust pool of college and career readiness indicators for K-8, but we do see where there are some measures related to acceleration measures about readiness of the students for high school. So the next steps in terms of this at the September meeting, what we anticipate is that Vice President Carter will ask for a vote from the board to approve a very high-level conceptual framework. And then from that framework, there would be direction for the ad hoc advisory committee, which is made up mostly of people from the field as well as parents. And then there's also a group at ADE, a technical advisory group, to take that conceptual framework and really start drilling down into what does that actually look like in terms of specific measures within the conceptual framework, as well as weighting those. Vice President Carter did indicate some weights early on at the prior meeting. I don't know at this time if those weights are going to be voted on at the next meeting, because they are subject to change once the tech reviewers start looking at this. So there might be more of a general vote regarding the conceptual framework and what those things would be that would be measured. Are there any questions on that? Anyone? Dr. Ty's up front here. He's one of our members on that ad hoc too. So once that work comes along, both from the ad hoc, those will be public meetings. Those will be open to the public to make comment on. So you're welcome to attend those meetings once they get scheduled. We anticipate that the SBE ad hoc will have a preliminary meeting before the board meeting, just to do introductions to elect a chair and co-chair, but we don't look at that as having any substantive conversation around this conceptual framework. It's just to get introductions underway. So after the September board meeting, that group can really get to work on hammering out the details. And ADE, the technical advisory group, has already been formed, so that's a lot of people. The directors of assessments are very involved in that. Roger, I see you in the back. Who else sits on that group? I know you do. Is that mostly assessment folks from the field?
Yeah, Jay from down in Tucson, Joe Macy's on there, John Tippel, pretty sure.
Okay, so we have, so there's a mix, in terms of the technical advisory group that can really crunch the numbers. And then there's also this ad hoc group that will also be looking at in terms of policy too. Another ad hoc advisory group that the board appointed was a K-3 literacy group. They're tasked with 5 functions. So part of, if you look at the statutory scheme related to literacy in Arizona as well as board rule, there's references to the board to make, provide guidance regarding intervention strategies, remedial strategies. And there hasn't been a lot of discussion around this as of late. This K-3 literacy group is made up of people from the field. It's mostly of superintendents or directors of literacy within the schools, as well as reading specialists. There's a few board members on there, and then I believe that there's also a lay member on there too. The third bullet point you see on there is critical, is that in connection with Move On in Reading, Representative Norgard championed a bill that allows the board to pass rules and policies regarding the distribution and proper use of K-3 reading funds. And from my discussions with the legislature, as well as following the audit that was done by the Auditor General on Move On when Reading, is that there are concerns related to the funding of K-3 and how that money is actually spent. The Auditor General's report didn't make, they didn't find, a misuse of funds, but there was concerns that there really aren't measurable outcomes from this program, that the state's funding at $40 million a year. So there were some recommendations from the Auditor General in connection with that. The third one, the last bullet point deals with the idea regarding retention and promotion of third grade students. We are the only state in the country that makes those decisions based on a single assessment. And also in connection with that single assessment, we're also the only state we have the lowest CUT score with that. ADE presented a white paper earlier this year to the board that suggested looking at other measures in addition to the statewide assessment and to guide those retention and promotion policies. So I would suspect that that K-3 ad hoc advisory group is going to come up with some suggestions around that, probably around using multiple measures and making those retention and promotion decisions. That will require a legislative change, so there'll probably be some potential for the board to run a bill on that. And I believe that there's also interest from the department on running a bill on that, so that might end up being a joint bill. Any questions on that?
So there'd be a potential change in the move on when reading requirement to retain kids. That would be the focus of such a bill.
That's correct. That would be part of that. So changes to 15701. Right now, it's just rooted in that one state assessment score, as well as, well, not even the assessment score, it's a subset of that one, not the reading part of it. The white paper looked at other things like portfolios, assessments that the district or the school might run, some kind of combination of those three. And again, those meetings will be open to the public, so I would encourage you to participate in that process and weigh in on that too. The third ad hoc that the board formed deals with educator enforcement actions. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but with House Bill 2620, there was a split where the executive staff of the board stays with the board and the investigative unit moved to the department effective July 1st of 2016. So the day-to-day investigative work will be conducted by the investigative unit now as ADE employees. Everything at that point forward still sits with the board. So whether or not a complaint is filed, whether or not there's a settlement, that will still sit with the board and through its Professional Practices Advisory Committee, which hosts the enforcement actions. So part of the discussion for this ad hoc is to look at how can we bring some efficiencies to the operation of the certification enforcement action, to the PPAC, I'm sorry. In the past, the PPAC had included either the option of having an ALJ host the enforcement actions or a hearing officer. Now they're facilitated strictly by the PPAC members. So we've had some conversations before the ad hoc about bringing back an ALJ or a hearing officer, because some of these hearings can run for hours, especially when the person is representing themselves. I had the pleasure of attending one of these till almost 9:30 at night one night. So we're looking to bring some efficiencies to that. So that way the members can really focus on acting as the fact finders rather than worrying about the procedural motions and whatnot that take place during the hearings. Another thing that we're looking at, and some of those will require rule change and as well as statutory change. For example, there's a provision right now by statute, if someone is denied an application, they have to sit out 5 years. There might be instances where it is appropriate for someone to be denied application, but that 5-year period may not necessarily be a good fit for that individual. So that's part of what this ad hoc will look at, is some statutory changes. And then the other thing is to bring some uniformity in terms of communicating to the field in terms of what's involved in the expectations around ethics, professionalism, and the disciplinary process. Oftentimes, teachers find out for the first time that we have expectations about professionalism when they've received a letter that they're in trouble, right? And there's very specific provisions within the code and within the statute about what's expected. So what we're hoping from this process from the ad hoc is that we can get some instructional materials together, some guidance materials, so that as part of your induction process or your work with teachers, we can inform them of those rules and expectations, as well as for principals and superintendents. I would say, for the most part, we don't see a lot of actions against principals and superintendents, but when they do, they relate to reporting procedures. We've posted on the board's website a resource guide about what the obligations are regarding reporting. I would say simply to you, if you have a teacher that you believe has engaged in misconduct and you report it to the police, report it also to the investigative unit.
Can I summarize in one sense by saying, so if you're a principal, assistant principal, superintendent, and you fail to make that required report, then you as the supervisor could end up jeopardizing your certificate.
Correct. You can be subject to an enforcement
So
action.
you need to be well aware of that. If a teacher engages in misconduct that causes you to make a police report, you need to make a report to the Department of Education. That's where the investigative unit is. Say that again.
And you would probably need to work with your HR department to make that report, because that's usually where those reports come from.
But you need to make sure, because ultimately the buck stops, for example, with the superintendent, that someone in your district needs to make that report. Then the other half of that, the investigation takes place through ADE, but the ultimate hearing, she called it the PPAC, the Professional Practices Advisory Committee, that's run by the State Board of Education. And one of our superintendents, Dr. Melissa Sadorf, is a member of one of those committees, and I don't know if we have other superintendents on there. Those committees then conduct the actual hearing that determines if a teacher or any professional retains or loses their certification. So these are committees that conduct their work, and often until I sat on that committee a few years ago, I was rather unaware of its existence, and yet people are losing their livelihood, or their livelihood is being jeopardized by the workings of these committees. So you really, as a professional in the field, you need to be aware of these committees.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry for that.
No, that's okay. So the number of enforcement actions had increased, and also along with that, there was a pretty significant backlog when I came on to the board, serving the board at the end of November of 2015. Since that time, we've closed, within that fiscal year, we closed about 600 cases. There's a lot of turnaround, I think, within the investigative unit in terms of staffing and expectations. I think we have the good fortune that the efforts are now being led by Garnett Wenders as the chief investigator. She's doing a great job. Dr. Sorov just joined one of our PPACs. We have a second PPAC that Dr. Denise Burlow is the superintendent representative on that. It's a very serious issue. I saw the report that came out in terms of just with the vacancies from, was it someone did a recent survey. And just within that, you can see the enormous amount of contract breaks that took place. So that unit is charged with investigating everything from contract breaks all the way up to really serious allegations of sexual conduct and misconduct and sexual abuse of children. So they have to direct their resources appropriately in terms of threat to the students in the classroom. But so as part of that turnaround, we were on track to have about 175 to 200 enforcement actions brought to the board, when normally about 60 a year were brought to the board. So I think part of that was raising the expectations of the unit. With the shift back to the department, it's slowed down a little bit because there's some vacancies that they need to fill, but I would expect that that's going to ramp up again in fiscal year 17. So as part of that, we want to get out there in the field and educate your teachers and your principals and your superintendents about the expectations. Because one of the challenges we really see coming before the board really deals oftentimes with the use and misuse of social media, whether that's in connection with what we would call boundaries issues, where it's not necessarily sexually driven, but it's very questionable about those relationships that teachers are engaging in outside of the classroom through social media, and then some of them completely cross that line to grooming and sexual misconduct or sexual harassment. So that's part of what we're looking to have come out of this ad hoc. Any questions on that? The other committee I wanted to advise you of is the Certification Advisory Committee. This is a standing committee of the board that's charged with reviewing certification rules. There's a number of things that are under discussion right now with that committee. Once that committee votes something up, then it goes to the board, and then that process starts to open rulemaking. So these are some things that are in very early discussion right now with that committee. One of them is a student teaching certificate. There's a student teaching certificate that exists in other states. This would allow the student teacher to be a teacher of record. It would not change anything with that relationship with the universities or those college prep programs. They would still be involved in terms of providing some support in terms of supervising student teachers just as they do now, but it would allow the LEAs to hire student teachers as the teacher of record. So what they've done in some of the other states is they've actually entered into a subpay for these student teaching CERTs. The other thing why states have done this too is it brings them within the code in terms of professionalism for the board, so that student teachers who violate the code are subject to discipline. Currently in Arizona, we don't have that option. So if you have a student teacher who engages in misconduct and you terminate that relationship, there's no action that the board can take on that. Another item that was brought up to the Certification Advisory Committee is the social worker certification. This has been up to that committee a number of times. That proposed language is getting more refined. There's a couple of things that were also discussed, and this came out of meetings, board meetings, in terms of the board's concerned about literacy skills, the superintendent's concerns about reading, about articulating what's expected from the teacher prep programs in terms of specifically teaching reading. If you look at the board rule right now, it just states the amount of hours that have to be taught in terms of credit hours, 45 credit hours for elementary ed. Within that, there has to be student teaching, but we don't have articulated coursework within our expectations. So that's under discussion, also about teaching content, articulating what that content's supposed to look like. When we were at, I was at GovMac recently, there was concerns expressed by a number of superintendents that they didn't feel like the elementary ed teachers necessarily had enough math content knowledge to be successful in teaching math. So that's part of the discussion we're having right now with the Certification Advisory Committee. And then the last thing we're working on is with one of the Senate bills, it changed that length of the standard cert for folks reciprocating into 8 years. So we're looking at changing all of the certs for cert holders in Arizona for those standard certs to be 8 years instead of 6. So all of this is in discussion. It's going to take a few meetings to get it vetted through the Certification Advisory Committee, and then from that it would go to the board and be open for rulemaking. So nothing's going to change overnight. If any of these are adopted and changes were to happen, we're looking at the end of the year or January. I see lots of people yawning. I'm so sorry. Any questions for me? I have a couple more. The other thing that came up in a recent conversation I've had with Vice President Carter is how can the board communicate to parents better? And so one of the things that he mentioned was, the access to your communication channels, because the LEAs have links into all the parents. We don't. There's probably plenty of parents in Arizona who don't even know that the board exists, let alone what we do. So we're looking for some opportunities. How can we really reach out to the parent stakeholders? Because when we do have parent membership on some of these ad hocs or other committees, there's a very small group of parents who track what the board does on any given day. And we'd like to have that opportunity to really reach out to more parents and get their input on these important policies, decisions that are before the board. So any thoughts that people have on that would be very appreciated. And then the other thing is I want to go back to something that Dr. Hansen brought up, is back when President Miller was on the board, we had contemplated the idea of forming sort of a kitchen cabinet that would be consisting of superintendents and principals to give feedback to the president. So with the change in leadership, with President Valentine being the president now and having lunch with him today, I'm going to bring that back up to him so that we can make sure that that feedback loop is open to the board in terms of feedback from the field. Now I see some nodding heads and less yawning, so that's a good thing. Any questions on any of this? I would really encourage all of you to participate when you can with the public meetings. Also, we have a resource that you can tap into anytime to give feedback. It's inbox at azsbe.az.gov. Inbox at azsbe.az.gov. We check that 2 or 3 times a day. We're very responsive to it. Information on that can also be shared with the board. And I want to thank Dr. Jordanstad so much. He's so active in the meetings that we have with policy groups, as well as attending board meetings. And I think he's a great champion for your organization. So thank you.